Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've gathered a whole stack of sources, plenty of research, and today we're really unpacking a defining political moment, one that absolutely grabbed global attention. We're talking about the election of Zohran Mamdani, who is now, officially, the first Muslim mayor of New York City. Now, this victory, it wasn't just some local race. It felt like a real watershed moment, and it immediately set off these four very distinct, very polarized reactions. You had everything from huge pride within the community right through to, frankly, conservative panic. So our mission today for this deep dive is to synthesize all that reaction and try to figure out what really powered this win.
Exactly. I mean, we need to get past the headline, the historic first, and really analyze the tension right at the heart of this political earthquake. And you mentioned the reactions. The voter turnout itself tells a story. It was record-breaking for a mayoral race, the highest in over 50 years. That points to an incredible mandate.
A huge mandate.
Huge. But was that mandate fundamentally about the symbolism of his identity? Or was it actually fueled by his economic platform, which was, let's be clear, unapologetically progressive?
Yeah, and that distinction feels really crucial here. Because when you have something that's, on one hand, so historic and uplifting for one group, and at the same time deeply alarming for another, you've really got to look closely at what drove the victory itself. So let's start there with the historic side. The shattered ceiling idea. What was that immediate feeling inside the Muslim and South Asian communities?
Well, the sources point to just a profound sense of catharsis and obviously historic significance. You have to remember the backdrop here. For these communities, particularly since 9/11, there's been this constant feeling of being seen through, well, a lens of suspicion or fear or just outright Islamophobia sometimes in the national discourse.
Right. That context is unavoidable.
Absolutely. So electing a Muslim man to lead America's biggest, most diverse city, it's more than just politics. It's symbolic. It's like reclaiming a space, getting validation. The reporting really hit on that feeling, like finally being seen as full participants in American civic life.
You can really understand that intimate personal reaction. We saw all these reports, people just expressing pure joy, seeing someone who, looks like us, sounds like us, in the city's top job.
But I have to ask, playing devil's advocate a bit for the listener, that joy is real, totally get that. But does focusing so much on identity risk reducing it all to just, tokenism?
Yeah.
How did the sources kind of grapple with that potential pushback?
That's a fair question. What was striking in the reporting, though, was how the community itself seemed to view the identity piece.
Right.
They saw it as a catalyst, yes, but not the whole story. The feeling was more like this win is this powerful beacon for the future. It inspires young Muslim and South Asian kids, tells them they can engage civically because that ceiling, it's gone. It's broken.
So inspiration, but not the sole reason for the win itself. Exactly. They understood Mamdani still had to run on substance and win on substance. And actually, this connects to the bigger picture because the reaction went international almost immediately. Congratulations just poured in. Very notably from London Mayor Sadiq Khan himself, the first Muslim mayor of his city.
Right, that parallel is strong.
And Khan's statement really underlined it. He said both cities, London and New York, chose hope over fear. It highlights that shared experience, overcoming these really entrenched barriers.
And it wasn't just London. His birthplace, Uganda, also expressed enormous pride. So it really did feel like a global moment, a validation of representation.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's circle back and really unpack that core tension we flagged at the start. Identity versus policy. The sources seem to suggest that, the identity was historic, monumental even, but the primary driver for that massive turnout, policy. But can you truly separate them? I mean, was his identity actually essential to getting those record numbers out, the numbers he needed to win?
That's where the strategic element the sources point to comes in. It seems for a lot of voters, especially that working class base that really carried him over the line, his identity was described as like the historic bonus.
The bonus, okay.
Yeah, but the core engine driving the campaign was pure material economic relief. And this wasn't, vague political talk. His platform zeroed in on making New York affordable. For families really struggling, right? We're talking concrete proposals. Universal childcare or rent freeze, things like free city buses, which are highly visible.
So these weren't just ideas on a website. They were almost like tactical tools, weren't they? Used to counter the narrative the opposition was trying to spin about his identity. He gave voters, maybe even cynical ones, solid reasons to engage.
Precisely, because the opposition jumped on him quickly with those inflammatory labels. We'll get to those in a minute. But those labels kind of lose their punch when you're facing the promise of, say, a rent freeze that directly helps your family's budget.
Makes sense.
That focus on kitchen table economics, it turned out to be a really effective shield against those identity-based attacks.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The victory speech. He didn't shy away from the labels at all. He actually leaned right into them. He made that statement that, well, it's going straight into the history books, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That moment was defining.
He's looking out at this huge crowd, and he addresses both things head on. I am Muslim. I am a democratic socialist, and most damning of all, I refuse to apologize for any of this.
Wow. Why was that defiance so important strategically? Why not just, talk about unity?
It was vital, because in that moment, he seized control of the narrative. By owning democratic socialist, he basically disarmed the opposition who wanted to paint it as this terrifying thing. He was sending a clear message to his base. Look, I am who I said I was during the campaign, and we won anyway.
That reassures all those progressive grassroots supporters, right?
Yeah.
It tells them he's not going to immediately water down his beliefs just because he won.
So it solidified his base.
Exactly. And then there was the communication style in that speech, too. He greeted the crowd in Arabic. He said, Ana minkum wa ilaykum.
Which means?
It translates to, I am of you and for you. Just that one phrase. It's incredibly powerful. It simultaneously connects directly with his Muslim and immigrant supporters, a statement of belonging, of service, but it also just demonstrated the new cultural reality of New York City leadership.
Yeah, that really lands the feeling of a genuine movement. Which brings us nicely to that movement itself, the progressive triumph side of things. This wasn't some quiet establishment victory party. The sources paint a picture of this incredibly energetic, almost ecstatic scene in Brooklyn.
Oh, absolutely. Jubilant was the word used over and over. Just infectious energy, music, dancing. It really reflected the campaign's roots. Diverse grassroots. And critically, this wasn't bankrolled by the old political machines. The data really backs this up. The campaign was powered by, get this, over 100,000 volunteers.
100,000, wow.
And mostly small dollar donations.
100,000 volunteers and small donations for a citywide race. That's just phenomenal. What does that grassroots funding tell us about the mandate he received?
It suggests a true groundswell, doesn't it? Not just clever political strategy. And for the progressive wing, particularly the Democratic Socialists of America and the DSA, this win is huge validation. Their whole model is often based on running these principled, sometimes anti-establishment campaigns that focus squarely on economic justice.
Right.
So winning the mayor's office in a global powerhouse like New York, it shows that strategy isn't some fringe idea anymore. It's effective. It proves that a platform pushing for, wealth redistribution and supporting the working class can actually translate into major political power. It could potentially shift the whole center of gravity for the Democratic Party well beyond just New York.
So in a nutshell, his supporters see this record turnout win as a clear, undeniable mandate for change, a rejection of the old way of doing politics, and a rejection of any billionaire-backed opposition that tried to stop him.
That's the narrative from the progressive side, yes.
Okay, so we've got the internal joy, the global nods of approval, the progressive triumph, but that kind of energy, that kind of change, it almost always sparks an equal and opposite reaction, doesn't it?
It absolutely did. And that takes us to the final and maybe the most intense sentiment group we looked at of the opposition. We really have to lay out the negative reaction here because it was strong. Intense anger, alarm, a full-on social media meltdown almost immediately after the results were clear. And this was coming mainly from national conservative figures, prominent Medjie supporters. Now, it's crucial, as you know, for us to report these views impartially, but we also need to understand the strategy behind them. The labels thrown at Mamdani were very specific, and they were designed to inflame.
Right. He was immediately hit with communist, extremist, radical socialist. We saw these explicit warnings popping up everywhere saying his win meant nothing less than the fall of New York City.
Exactly. And those labels weren't just random insults. They're political shorthands, right? Meant to tie him directly to failed regimes, failed historical ideas. The goal is to scare moderate voters, especially maybe suburban ones, away from his actual policies.
By associating universal child care or rent freezes with
historical catastrophe. Yeah, basically bypassing any real discussion of the policies themselves.
And depressingly, as the data showed us, that outrage often tipped over into just overt anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant stuff.
Yes, sadly. The reporting highlighted that. You had some extreme voices on social media actually calling for his deportation.
Despite him being a U.S. citizen.
Despite him being a U.S. citizen, it starkly shows how when identity becomes such a central political flashpoint, the opposition can just descend into hateful rhetoric very quickly. The actual policy substance almost gets lost in the online noise.
And wrapping up this opposition section, we can't ignore the very specific, very public reaction from former President Donald Trump. He'd attacked Mamdani before the election, even threatened to pull federal funds if he won.
Right, that threat was made.
And then after the election, his reaction was just 3 words on social media, very cryptic. And so I begins.
Yeah. That post definitely fueled the anxiety among his base. It sort of implied this local New York election was the salvo in some bigger national decline driven by progressives. High stakes, high anxiety.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. What's the bigger meaning here, beyond just NYC?
Well, if we connect the dots, Mamdani's success really showcases a potentially potent political model. It suggests, maybe even proves, that a progressive, anti-establishment candidate, a candidate of color, can win one of the most powerful political offices anywhere. And the key seems to be that relentless focus, that laser focus on the material economic needs of working-class people.
That's a really powerful takeaway. But let's just grapple with that tension one last time, the identity versus policy thing. We've sort of established policy was the mandate, identity was the history, the symbol. But in today's hyper-polarized world, can a politician really keep those separate? Or did that historic bonus of his identity actually help drive the record turnout he needed for the policy mandate? Did one enable the other?
I think the sources suggest it's a really complex interplay. You can't entirely pull them apart. The identity certainly opened doors, right? It mobilized a base that was maybe underrepresented before, a base that desperately wanted that symbolic change.
Okay.
But the policy kept them engaged. It gave them a reason beyond symbolism to show up, and it offered a promise that their vote would lead to tangible improvements in their lives. And maybe that policy focus is what ultimately insulated him somewhat from the worst of the identity-based attacks.
Okay, so what does this all boil down to for you, the listener? This deep dive really highlights something crucial. While a politician's identity can be absolutely monumental, a ceiling-shattering symbol, the core engine driving a victory, the foundation for that mandate, still seems to rest on those concrete, kitchen-table policy promises. Things like universal affordability, childcare, rent freezes. That focus gives people both a reason to vote and the political armor needed to withstand the inevitable attack.
A powerful combination when it works.
Indeed. And that leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over, something to maybe explore on your own. Given these incredibly polarized reactions we saw both here and globally, does focusing mainly on policy actually inoculate a candidate against identity-based political attacks? Or does it simply give that politician the mandate, the solid base of support they need to weather